Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast. I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Nathan Miller. Nathan, is excited to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And before, of course, we jump into everything and talking and hearing a lot more about all the awesome things Nathan is doing, I want to read a little bit more about Nathan so you can hear about some of those awesome things. And Nathan is the CEO and founder of Miller Inc., a full service, award winning strategic and crisis communication firm headquartered in Los Angeles. He has helped hundreds of organizations tell their stories and navigate complex issues and crises around the globe. Before founding Miller Inc. in 2013, Nathan served in a number of roles at the intersection of communications and public policy, including as the director of speech writing for Israel's permanent mission to the United Nation. And one of the awesome things that I was doing before preparing for this is listen to a lot of what Nathan was talking about and related to PR and how it's evolving and changing. And one of the things I really stuck with me is he had this quote about storytelling. He said, whether we're painting on cave walls or posting on social channels telling stories has always been a fundamental human need. So excited to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that and all of what he
Yeah,
thinks of why hashtag PR might be dead, at least in the way that we thought about it before. But Nathan, are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
a- absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited, and I love that. That's one of my quotes. I love that. Every group I speak to, I start with that big picture of cavemen painting on a cave wall because you think about that. These people didn't have enough to eat. They're scrounging around for food. They don't know where their next meal's coming from. Life is nasty short, you know, and they still take time to paint on the cave wall. That's how much we need stories in our life.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating. You consider like all the evolution as far as like technology and all these things that we never could have dreamt that we were able to do and we're able to do now. But storytelling is one of those like really big aspects all throughout history and all throughout our lives. So I love
They
that you've been able to kind of to notice that obviously and be able to kind of empower people and how powerful that
it's
is.
they say that when you read a lot of the anthropological research, one of the reasons that human beings evolved, sort of at the top of the pyramid on Earth, it's because we have this ability to tell stories
Mm.
and to share information with each other and to take all the complexities of the world around us, distill it down into something that that we can share with others, and then that can get transmitted. And the way that knowledge has gone viral throughout human history, um, and obviously with the pace of change and technology and everything else that speeds up and speeds up. But yeah, that's our superpower as a species. You could even say is storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess it's only right for us to kick things off by rewinding our clock a little bit, hear a little bit more about your story. We'll let you get started with all the awesome work you're doing.
Absolutely. Um, so um, I've spent the last almost 20 years working in strategic communications. I began my career shortly after 9/11, working in sort of the intersection of comms and national security, foreign policy. I worked in Brussels at a think tank working with the EU institutions. I worked in Washington D.C. Um, at a group looking at how the business community could think more about national security in the U.S. Um, and then I worked at a PR agency here in LA, working on local public affairs mostly and national issues. In 2010, I got an opportunity to become the chief speechwriter at Israel's mission to the United Nations, um, which was a really fascinating and important job for my career. I learned a lot, and it's an interesting time to be working on Middle Eastern issues. We had the outbreak of the Arab Spring, a major global conversation around that and around Iran and a number of other issues. And I was the only speechwriter for the entire mission. So for the ambassador and 20 diplomats, I was the only American native English speaker there.
Wow.
And I was pretty young. I got that job at 25 and did it for 3 years. And the folks at the U.S. mission doing the same job were in their 40s or 50s and had been, so it was a really great opportunity to work for a really small country that I have an affinity to, and learned a lot. And then I saw in 2013 I was finishing that and wanted to move back to Los Angeles, and started looking around at different job opportunities here, and nothing really stood out. There wasn't a job that I was particularly excited about in LA, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to create the job I want.
Mm.
And at the time, I was young and stupid and didn't understand all that came with that. But it was a huge challenge and a great challenge, and I think it gave me a lot of grit. I went from writing the speeches that Israel delivered in the UN Security Council to working for a high school fashion show, which was my first client. And that was humbling. And you kind of learn in a client service business um, how to how to treat every client like they're the most important client in the world, how to give it your all, how to leave, everything on the field every day. And I've grown the agency over the last 11 years quite a bit. We have about 20 employees, 50 to 60, 70 clients any given time. We have team here in LA, also in New York and San Francisco. We're one of the leading crisis communication shops in LA, in the West Coast, really. And I do a lot of big national work, and so work with global clients. And we work across technology, real estate, public affairs, some nonprofit. We have a sister agency that does social impact consulting. We do a lot of work around people's giving story and CSR. Um, and I love it. And every day is different. And there's a lot to talk about in terms of getting from where I started to where we are. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. And there's nothing more gratifying than building something yourself and having a vision for something when nothing existed, and giving your all every day to make it happen. It comes with huge risks, a lot of a lot of brain damage, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and I love that you use that word grit and how powerful that is. But I also appreciate you in sharing a little bit more of the behind the scenes of like what that journey looked like. Because I think so many times you hear success, see the number of clients that you're able to impact and work with, hear the number of employees, just all those things, but you don't necessarily hear a lot of the behind the scenes of like what it took to kind of get there. And I think when people are going through that journey, sometimes you can feel like you're doing it wrong, or you made a mistake. But sometimes just the ups and downs and the peaks and the valleys are actually part of the journey, and the people that do reach that success don't do it without any blemishes. It takes a while, and then I imagine that it can be a long journey at times too.
It's yeah. Whatever you think, however long you think it's going to take to build a business, you should double it. And however hard you think it's going to be, it's going to probably be harder. And that's just the truth. And I've seen that in every new vertical we've opened in the agency. But you've got to kind of be signed up for just sort of like loving the work and being in it every day. Agency owners who say, I just want to build something and sell it in 3 to 5 years. I don't get that. It just could never be me. I want to build a company that I'm excited to work at every day. That's my most important goal. And if I make a good living doing that, if I build something amazing doing that, it's a great byproduct. But that, if you're not like fundamentally in that mindset, I don't know how else you do this well. It's just, I don't know what that journey looks like.
Yeah, well, what is the saying? Find something you love to do. You never work a day in your life. And
Yeah, it's totally true.
yeah.
It's totally true.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I think you always hear like people say, when you start a business, do something that you're passionate about, but you don't necessarily have to do something you're passionate about. But I think because you put so much, for lack of a better term, blood, sweat, and tears into everything that you're building, sometimes I imagine it's the passion that does keep you going, the thing that, fulfilling that vision, that having
Totally.
that journey of seeing those things come to fruition is probably what is sometimes is the gas in the tank.
Yeah, there's so many things that are fulfilling about running a company like mine. I had dinner last night with a guy who worked for me, who worked here at the agency a few years back, and he was like repeating things that I told him, and I was like, wow, like I don't even remember telling you that, but I've had probably I don't know, 150 people that have worked for me over the last 11 years, something like that. I don't know. I mean,
Mhm.
was trying to think about how many. It was my guesstimate. Um, not every one of them probably had the best experience, but most of them did, and I think like I have a lot of incredible folks who are now doing amazing things that we've helped to launch or advance in their career. Um, and that's something that I really value, and I get a lot of pride and gratification from knowing that you are moving folks along on their professional journey, giving them the professional skills, giving them the trust, the support, the opportunity. Um, and I see it every day with our team, just watching people get better, watching people kind of rise to a challenge. I get a lot more gratification out of that than me solving the problem, to be honest. That's one thing. And the same thing is true about our clients. I mean, so many of my clients have become good friends, and they've brought me into rooms and situations um, that I could never have been in. And then the other thing is just sort of, I love the game. I love playing the game that I'm in and winning and figuring out what's the solution to this problem. The more challenging the situation, the more fun it is in some ways, because that's part of the reason I love crisis comms is at the end of the day, I like being a problem solver and thinking about what are the different opportunities given all all that's possible here, and figuring out, you know, the longer you do something, the more you have pattern recognition, and the more tools you have in your toolbox to bring to any given situation where you've done it before. But just getting better myself and being a good problem solver, it's just a lot of fun. I would say making money is in terms of how much gratification. I mean, it's important, right? You need to have a profitable business, but like it's not my driver, and it's not what gives me all the gratification, all that other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't end up being everything, but I think that's why it's so remarkable that you had that experience at a young age, as you mentioned, with your peers, to be able to have such an esteemed position and opportunity, and how you've been able to kind of recreate that to some degree, for other
Yeah,
people as well too, and give them that opportunity to just try to run with it. So I wanted to drill down a little bit more, hear a little bit more about what crisis comms is, like how you are working with and impact your clients, and what that process looks like.
sure. So crisis communications is any situation. Generally, the elements of a crisis communications challenge are: there's an issue that has the potential to affect significantly the reputation of an individual or an organization. Usually there's some time bound element, meaning something has to happen within some fixed period of time. You can do crisis communications. You can do crisis planning, which is different than crisis comms. We're planning an event, which we could talk about. But when you're in an active crisis communication situation, it means there's some time bound element. So you have to act quickly. Um, and it's a rapidly changing field. The way that people consume information, communicate with each other, the media environment, all of those things have changed dramatically since I started doing this work. The problem with crisis comms that I see often is it's a lot of legacy firms doing legacy things that don't matter anymore. They ran a great, their
Mm.
strategy would have been great in 1996, but it doesn't work today. And so what we have to do is be looking at the environment around us and understand the changes month by month, year by year, and then think creatively, you know, how do we sort through what's real and fake on social media? How do we give, in a sea of information, how do we help our clients focus on the things that really matter? How do we develop a message that's going to resonate? How do we make it break through in this sea of content and information? How do we understand the right way to interact with media, with traditional media, in a moment when many are struggling, when many are declining, when there's less reporters? Um, issues like SEO or online reputation management, or how do you bring investigative resources to bear to get the best information for your client in a moment? How do you um, deal with litigation? You know, have those skills to deal with with an active litigation with all these other changes in the communications environment overlaid. So those are the things we think about. We have a great network of relationships with different firms that do a bunch of different things to help navigate in this moment. So I think that's one of our superpowers. But the thing that is most important and that clients come to again and again is they want someone who's calm under the pressure, who can give them really clear advice and sound judgment that they trust. And that's something that's hard to teach. You have to hire for that, and and there's not really a great substitute for a lot of experience in doing it. And I've been doing it for almost 20 years now, and you just sort of get better and better and better, and that's the truth.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and it's funny that you were mentioning that a lot of times because you kind of have gone through, I imagine, so many different experiences or seen so many things. I
Yeah,
imagine it probably adds to that that peace, that calmness that you're able to provide the clients
totally,
because it's not your first rodeo, and as they're probably
totally.
coming, wired and things and not sure and all the emotions, you probably have seen maybe not that exact thing, but probably something similar, and it probably helps you to bring peace to the situation.
So often our clients come in and like in their stress level, like from a 1 to a 10, it's a 10.
Right.
And I'm like looking at the situation and I'm thinking, like, this is like on a bad scale, it's like a 2 out of 10,
Right.
and you just kind of have to. But for them, it's real and
It's
palpable and
everything.
intense. So it's thinking about, yeah, using your past experience and understanding what is how is all of this likely to play out in the communications environment, and what are their goals and who are their audiences and what's the message we need to deliver, and just thinking through all those things really carefully and strategically with them is super important.
Yeah, you can definitely hear that even in the questions and the things that you were saying that you all consider, because I think so many times when you're in that crisis, I imagine as well too, you're not thinking as holistically, I'll say, as you could, and to be able to ask those questions and understand not just what has happened, but also what might be happening in the media or what might be changing from a technology. Just understanding all those different aspects to come up with that plan is probably huge to be able to again alleviate those all those emotions
Yeah,
as I talked about.
we put together a little animated video uh, a few months back about crisis comms, and it captures something that I say a lot, which is when you're in the middle of a crisis, you're being asked to make decisions. It's as if it's the same mindset or mental state as if you were driving down the freeway at 100 miles an hour, weaving in and out of traffic and smoking a cigar.
Uh,
And they're saying to you, you're doing all that, and then make the most important decision, for your company or of your life. So that is the environment that people that's where people are, and it's impossible. So one of the things we really push people to do, that video is sort of a call to action into, you got to do crisis planning.
yeah,
You have to have a crisis plan ahead of time. You have to think through a lot of, who's going to decide, how are they going to decide, what's like the rough protocol if X, Y, or Z happens, what will the statement be, who will the spokesperson be, all of those questions you have to think through, and you need an expert, someone who's done it before to help you do it. So we do a lot of crisis planning. It's one of our core uh, just sort of business offerings, and I think it's really important, and for the very reason that you outlined, which is people are a mess in a crisis. They're in they're the worst mindset ever, and it's the last moment in which they should be making important decisions.
yeah, that makes so much sense, and I love that you mentioned that part, being able to kind of lean on obviously your team or people that are able to have that experience because it helps out so much. It makes it a lot easier to smoke that cigar if you know that somebody else is
Yeah,
driving and doing all the other things,
yeah,
and they have that under
yeah,
control and they've done it a few times.
totally.
So I love that. So I know you mentioned crisis planning, obviously the crisis communications. Are there any other ways that you all try to help to support your clients you wanted to mention? And also, I think you mentioned this too as part of what is your secret sauce, your superpower. What helps you stand apart and be unique?
Yeah, I think it's we have those fundamental communication skills. Going back to the caveman to reference you earlier,
Mhm.
you know, we only hire people who are great writers, who have like deep um, listening skills, the ability to have a like really high EQ, understand how something's going to play, in the bedside manner with the client to understand how to speak to them in a challenging moment, often when it comes to crisis, or even just in general when you're dealing with just normal traditional PR or strategic comms. But we pair that with an understanding of where the environment is today. I like kind of having a laboratory here.
Mm.
So, we'll have a problem that'll come up on a case, and I'll be like, I want to figure out how we do that better the next time. And so I'll assign someone on our team to so what we noticed that we needed to have a lot better relationships, not just with journalists, but with a lot of the freelancers, because that created a whole other avenue for us to get into papers, because there's just less staff at the papers now. There's less regular reporters, and these freelancers are sort of scattered all over the place, and it's hard to find them. It's not a great media database. So I made it someone's full-time job for a year to build our relationship with freelancers. We have an incredible relationship now with thousands of freelancers across all the different areas we need to work. And our capability as a firm, I think, is stronger in that area than anybody else, even the really huge multi-billion-dollar PR agencies, because we saw a specific acute need, and I invested the resources to do it. And we think about that systematically when we look about the areas where we work. I'm never afraid to invest resources if I think it's going to improve the core product. And so we're always thinking about that. And I do the same thing with people that come through here. We're constantly. I'm always hiring. There's not a day that I'm not hiring, because if you find a great person who's got a skill set that can be, helpful for us, I'll snap up that person and I'll figure out how we put them to work, and it always works out. And that way, you're never in a situation where you get all these clients and you have to kind of make compromises when it comes to hiring. That's for me like the most important thing. I don't really recruit from other PR firms. I don't think that our field does a great job of training people or recruiting them. I often find people who are former journalists or worked in politics or worked in the nonprofit sector or were lawyers or did something else, and we teach them PR and we teach them strategic comms. And I think constantly recruiting for great people and not being afraid to overinvest in staff. I mean, the conventional wisdom for agencies is stay as lean as possible, squeeze as much as you can out of every person, make sure your profit is hot. That's the way you maximize your profit. And people are sort of widgets that you can kind of move in and out. And that's probably true if you're a really big agency, because they have these systems. I think it limits their ability to be effective, because everything then becomes cookie cutter. And if anybody can do the job, what's the value proposition? So I think we think about ourselves really as a boutique in that way. And we're always hiring, and then we're always training. We have every quarter we do a major offsite where we go really deep with our entire team, where we do skills training for those who need it, and then we do like a deeper dive into where the market is and how we can do better. And then every week we have at least an hour of training where we do a lunch and learn. I'll bring in a journalist or someone, or another practitioner, or someone internally will present. And through that training process, we're always making people better. And I think people, the lesson I've learned over the years is that A players want to be with other A players, and A players want to have the opportunity to thrive and grow. And if you're not feeding that need, people are going to leave, and they're not going to be happy, and they're going to be less effective as team members. So if you're not investing in that, again, it's not on the direct, like, we're doing this for this client to drive this bottom line. If you think more holistically about what is the core product offering that you're bringing to the market, how are you investing in it constantly to stay ahead of the game? And you have to think about it almost like a passion project in that sense. I think it's a good business strategy too. I think it's actually why we've continued to grow. And we've upped our marketing game recently, I would say over the last year and a half or two, to do more proactive stuff for the firm. But in general, the reason I get new clients is because we do a great job with our existing clients, and they refer us, to other folks. And you can call anybody we've worked with, and they'll say they did a great job, and that's more important than anything else that I can do, to grow this business.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Being able to be of value and provide value is sometimes one of the best marketing strategies you can have. But I got shades of Glengarry, Glen Ross. Always be selling, you always be
Yeah,
hiring, and always be training, which is what I
yeah,
love that you all do.
yeah,
It makes you
totally. Yeah, yeah. And obviously, you need to have the deal. Like you need to have the business flow to, the deal flow to come in to sustain that.
right.
But fortunately, we have been, and we're picky, and so it's not like we're always hiring, but you
Not
know,
hiring everybody.
of the of the folks who come in, like we have a really rigorous process, and we're really selective about who we ultimately bring in. But if somebody's great, somebody's truly extraordinary, and we don't have a spot, quote unquote, well, I'll figure out a way to bring them on.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I love that you mentioned that high IQ, EQ as well too, and of course being able to kind of provide that and marry that with the skills for PR that you all are able to train. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit and ask you
Yep.
for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be like an app, a book, or even a habit that you have, but what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
I so this will be. I changed up my lifestyle a little bit in the last year and a half, 2 years, which has been great for me. I was in, and this is even with I have three little kids, so around the time of my second son, my son's now 5. When he was born, um, I gained a little bit of weight, but it wasn't even that. It was more just I felt like my lifestyle was because I do this crisis work, on the phone all the time. Um, get home, eat dinner, get back on my computer, work till 2 a.m., not working out enough. Waking up in the morning, getting a pastry and a coffee every day on my way to work. Um, and I started to really take a lot more seriously my health around that time. And it's been a total game changer for me. It wasn't like I was in horrible shape, but I think it was a combination of, so the things that I've been doing, I guess, I know that's probably not the subject, but I'll preach a little bit because I
Go
love
for
this
it.
stuff. Um, I cut out carbs in the morning, and so I just do like yogurt or something with some protein to kind of, I tried to reduce my coffee intake to a cup in the morning and then a decaf in the afternoon. I used to have 3 or 4 cups of coffee a day. Terrible for your sleep. I've tried to get a lot more religious on my sleep if I can. I have a newborn now and it's harder, but in general, I try to get 8 hours a night. And that means if I have to shut it off, I try to be off my computer at least an hour, hour and a half before I have to go to bed. So I'm not working right up until the last minute and then just like falling into bed because you don't sleep well. I noticed that. And then making time in the morning to work out,
Mhm.
and just putting it on my calendar and giving myself permission to do that.
Mhm.
It took me about 8 years of running this company. Up until that point, I said, there's no time I'm not going to be available because a client might need me.
Right.
I'm always flexible and I'm always available. But what I found is I kickbox twice a week. And in 2 years, I've been doing it for 2.5 years, but in 2 years of doing it twice a week, I've had to cancel once or twice for business reasons. Otherwise, I make it
Mhm.
and I work around it. And if you kind of block that time out and you're, and you can take your health seriously, I think it pays dividends. I think I'm a better boss. I'm a better, uh, practitioner of this field, and it just keeps me balanced. And I think it's super important.
Yeah, I appreciate you so much sharing that. That's exactly what we were looking for because I say so many times we forget about the human part of business and
Yeah.
talking about that health piece and the holistic part of health and like what that looks like is so many times we forget that. And I especially think in crisis communication, crisis planning, even
Yeah.
you pour into so many other people. People are coming to you, I imagine, when they're at the highest of the highs as far as
Yep.
emotions that
Yeah.
you have to pour into them, but you can't pour from an empty cup, the saying is. So you have to make sure that you are doing those things to make sure you're as close to peak position and peak health as you can be.
Totally. I'm really into this guy, Peter Attia,
Mhm.
um, he has a new book called Outlive, and he has a podcast. Um, and he talks about, his exercise, like training for, he's training for the Centurion Decathlon. He says for what, when he's 100 years old, what does he want is shit. But
That's
I think
awesome.
about that a lot, that if you're not actively training for something, for some, um, and you're not, and you don't plan for, if you're not intentional about whatever it is that you're trying to do, then bad habits are going to overwhelm, and convenience is going to overwhelm, and this person asking you to do this thing is going to take precedence, or whatever it is. So I've had to learn, because I have total freedom in some sense, because I have freedom to run in running my own company. I also have freedom to totally abuse myself, which I do
Mhm.
often, because that's sort of like, to be successful in this business, that's what you got to do. And so it's just about creating structure from a high level, to make sure you don't do that.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think so much too, and all the things you do. And I love that you used the lab analogy when we were speaking earlier, because I think so many times, even though there's, I guess, a standard or the way things are done, sometimes within an industry, a lot of times to create innovation, to do things differently, you have to go into the lab. You have to figure out, okay, I can still be successful, and I don't have to do this, and you can start to create a new narrative around what you're doing. And a lot of times, do it better than what was done before, largely because
Yeah,
you're doing those things.
you got to have the belief that you can do it better.
Mhm.
Um, and that's not an arrogance. It's just, if you don't believe that if you work hard enough you can do it better, then you're sort of, you it's very hard then to be excellent. Even if you never reach that peak or you never do it better, you got to believe that you can, and you got to strive for that. I
Yeah.
always tell our team, I say, I want to be the best agency in the world that does this thing that we do. I don't care, who else is doing it. It doesn't matter. Like, we have to have our own internal bar in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think excellence is something that never goes out of style. As I talked about
No.
before, it ends up being great for being able to kind of get your name out there in the market and all those things. But I think even internally, it gives you a lot of purpose. And as you talked about, with the podcast, Outlet Podcast, it also gives you something to strive for. If you're always looking for
Yeah.
excellence, knowing that you never ever reach there, but you can always get closer and closer to it, then again, it just starts to be like a rallying cry, I imagine, for the team too.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
What would you consider to be a little bit more what I call a CEO nugget? A little bit more word of wisdom or piece of advice. It might be something you would tell your favorite client, or if you were to hop into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self.
Something I tell people a lot. Business is a repeating game. It's not a zero sum game. So it's always better to have the other guy feel like he got the better end of the deal, because good relationships compound. They lead to more good relationships and more good things, and bad relationships and bad feelings similarly compound. There's nothing you can do to cover up a bad reputation. And it's not just about the reputation that you have in the media. That obviously is matters. But, I work with a lot of people in crisis. And sometimes the people who have the best reputation in the media have the worst reputation interpersonally, and vice versa. People have the worst reputation. So how you treat people and how you make people feel really matters. And you got to take that really seriously. It's kind of like a sacred thing. Um, so I always think about every interaction as an opportunity to build sort of that positive compounding, whatever you want to call it, energy, you know, relationship, sort of like, social capital, how you describe it. Um, and I think that the business folks that I most respect, that I love to work with, have that mentality. It's not everybody. There's some people who have a zero sum mentality, do great, and who can build great companies. But, um, for me as a CEO, and my success has always come from treating people right in one context, and then having them understand that and remember that in a different one.
Yeah, it ends up going back to that golden rule, and I'm a big
Yeah.
believer in the way you do one thing is the way you do all things. So if you're
Yeah.
showing up and being of value, being reminding yourself of creating impact for that person or treating that person well, I think that translates to so many different aspects in our life and in our businesses as well too.
Yeah.
What would you consider to be your answer to my absolute favorite question, the definition of what it means to be a CEO? Our goal is to have different quote unquote CEOs on this show. So Nathan, what does being a CEO mean to you?
Um, Being a CEO is having the wisdom, vision, and audacity to lead. A good CEO is, and putting others before yourself.
I love that. And I really love that word audacity, because a lot of times when you have that vision and even if you have the wisdom along the way to do that, sometimes it's all those audacious visions, those audacious thoughts, the ego, not in the sense of I think I'm better, but in the way that I can make a better impact and I can do and build a better widget or a better mousetrap, however we do that,
Yeah,
is something that does end up being that rallying cry and that thing for not just the CEO, but also all the members of the team and investors, customers, everybody to rally behind.
absolutely.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, Nathan, truly appreciate that definition. Of course, I appreciate your time even more. So, what I want to do now is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know, and of course, how best people can get a hold of you, find about all the awesome things you and your team are working on.
Thanks so much. It's really great to be here. I really appreciate you having me on. Um, we are Our website is Miller Inc. with a K, MILLERINK.com. You can check out, we have a bunch of content and resources, and also you can contact me there. We're also on LinkedIn, Insta, Facebook, all the socials. So you can check out what what our team is putting on there. And yeah, it's really great to be on the show, and thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you, and of course, to make it even easier, we'll have the links and information in the show notes as well
Great.
too. But truly appreciate you taking some time out and kind of reminding us of how important it is to go in the lab, so to speak, whether we're talking about personally, professionally, or a combination of both. But we can build and create a better way. We just sometimes have to roll up our sleeves and create the opportunity to do that. So thank you so much and taking the lead for that. And I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
Thanks so much.